This year, the planet has already produced 5 Category 5 storms, and it's not even the middle of hurricane season yet. The latest one, Super Typhoon Dolphin, briefly became the strongest typhoon ever recorded this close to the international date line, with sustained winds over 160 miles per hour and waves reaching 13 meters, taller than a 4-story building. It's on pace to beat a global record that has stood since 1997. Right now, it's barreling toward Japan, Taiwan, and the Ryukyu Islands, and its exact path is still uncertain. Today, we're breaking down exactly how Dolphin got this powerful, why 2026 is producing Category 5 storms at a record pace, and what that has to do with something called a Super El Niño. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever experienced a typhoon or hurricane at its peak strength? Tell me where you were. If you want to be the first to know every time something major happens with Earth's weather and geology, subscribe to the channel right now. It is completely free. Thumbs up also helps enormously. Let's go for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm actually shows it to the people who need to see it. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. How Dolphin became a record-breaking storm super typhoon. Dolphin formed in the Western Pacific in late July 2026 and intensified with extraordinary speed, reaching peak strength around July 30th and 31st. At its height, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center recorded 1-minute sustained winds of roughly 160 miles per hour, about 257 kilometers per hour, squarely in Category 5 territory, the highest classification on the tropical cyclone scale. Some bulletins during the storm's peak measured gusts as high as 324 kilometers per hour, generating waves reported at 13 meters, taller than most 4-story buildings. The storm's eye wall, the ring of most violent wind surrounding its calm center, spanned roughly 50 kilometers in diameter, a relatively compact but extremely powerful structure. What makes Dolphin genuinely historic isn't just its wind speed. According to meteorologists Jeff Masters and Bob Henson, writing for Yale Climate Connections, Dolphin became the strongest typhoon on record to develop this close to the international dateline, a remarkable distinction for a storm forming in a part of the Pacific not typically associated with the Western Basin's most intense systems. Dolphin intensified rapidly over sea surface temperatures running 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above the seasonal average in the Philippine Sea, exactly the kind of unusually warm water that fuels rapid intensification, the dangerous phenomenon, where a storm's wind speed jumps dramatically within a very short window, sometimes gaining 35 miles per hour or more in under 24 hours. 5 Category 5. Storms before August even ends. Here's the number that makes this story bigger than just one storm. Dolphin is the 5th Category 5. Tropical cyclone recorded globally in 2026 alone, and meteorologists tracking this pace note it currently exceeds the trajectory of the all-time global record year, 1997, when 12 Category 5 storms occurred across the entire year. The 4 storms that reached Category 5 strength before Dolphin this year illustrate just how active 2026 has been across every major ocean basin. Tropical cyclone Horatio hit 160 mph winds in the remote South Indian Ocean back in February, never affecting land. Super Typhoon Sinlaku reached 185 mph winds in April, making landfall across the U.S. Northern Mariana Islands, with an eye large enough to pass over both Tinian and Saipan Islands simultaneously. Super Typhoon Bobby followed in July with 290 kph winds, sparing the Philippines but causing an estimated 23 to 26 deaths across Asia, primarily from flooding and landslides driven by its enhancement of the seasonal monsoon. Now Dolphin has joined that list, and notably, meteorologists specifically flagged it as more powerful at peak than both Sinlaku and Bobby. The Super El Niño connection? To understand why 2026 keeps producing storms this powerful, you need to understand the climate pattern sitting behind almost all of them. A Super El Niño, an unusually powerful version of the El Niño climate pattern that occurs when average sea surface temperatures across the central and eastern equatorial Pacific rise 2 degrees Celsius or more above normal. El Niño years reshape tropical cyclone activity globally, though the effect looks different depending on the ocean basin. In the Western Pacific specifically, where Dolphin formed, El Niño years tend to push the region of most active typhoon formation further east, and they're frequently associated with unusually warm water extending across a wider stretch of ocean, exactly the kind of expanded warm water fuel source that allows storms to both form more easily and intensify more explosively once they do. This is the same broad climate mechanism we referenced when covering tropical storm, Bertha's unusual double landfall along the U.S. Gulf Coast a few weeks ago, where wind shear, tied to developing El Niño conditions, was actively limiting how much that particular storm could strengthen. A Super El Niño doesn't uniformly make every storm stronger everywhere. It reshapes the entire playing field, sometimes suppressing storms in one basin through increased wind shear, while simultaneously loading another basin with the warm water and atmospheric conditions that produce exactly the kind of rapid, extreme intensification Dolphin experienced. Where Dolphin is headed now, as of the most recent tracking, Dolphin has weakened somewhat from its peak Category 5 intensity, with the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's warning number 21 placing sustained winds around 125 knots, roughly 230 kilometers per hour, still the equivalent of a strong Category 4 hurricane. The storm has been tracking west-northwest, with forecast guidance shifting its projected path closer to the longitude of the Ryukyu Islands and Okinawa, rather than mainland Tokyo. As of the most recent advisories, neither the Japan Meteorological Agency nor the Joint Typhoon Warning Center had issued formal watches or warnings for mainland Japan, Taiwan, or Korea, though residents of Japan's remote Ogasawara Islands were advised to follow JMA guidance closely. Taiwan's Central Weather Administration has described Dolphin's path as genuinely uncertain even this close to potential impact, with meteorologist Wu Derong noting only about a 10% chance the storm's outer circulation affects northern Taiwan directly, while other forecast models show scenarios ranging from the storm passing north of Taiwan entirely to eventually curving toward the Korean peninsula if the Pacific high-pressure system currently sitting over the East China Sea weakens. A separate, smaller tropical depression, potentially becoming Typhoon Kujira, formed east of the Philippines around the same time, though forecasters expect its moisture to be largely absorbed into Dolphin's broader circulation, rather than developing independently. Why? A weakening storm still isn't a relief. This is a critical point. Meteorologists have been careful to stress throughout Dolphin's forecast, and it directly echoes something we discussed when covering Bertha's Gulf Coast track. Weakening does not mean harmless. Typhoons that recurve or track near Japan after peak intensity often grow physically larger, even as their peak wind speeds decline, spreading damaging wind, heavy swell, and flooding rain across a considerably wider geographic area than a smaller, more intense storm would. The Philippine disaster risk. Reduction and Management Council pre-positioned relief goods and deployed rescue teams to high-risk provinces well ahead of Dolphin's approach, and fishing communities across the storm's projected path were ordered back to port as a precaution, standard preparation protocol regardless of whether a storm's peak Category 5 winds persist all the way to landfall. Forecasters have specifically flagged storm surge, rather than wind alone, as one of the greatest threats to life from a storm system of this scale, with earlier projections estimating surge heights of 3 to 6 meters, above normal tide in the most exposed coastal areas along Dolphin's original projected track, alongside rainfall totals of 200 to 400 millimeters over a 24-hour period, more than enough to trigger dangerous flash flooding and landslides across the mountainous terrain common throughout the Philippines, Taiwan, and southern Japan. What happens next? Japan's Meteorological Agency and Taiwan's Central Weather Administration continue issuing updated advisories as Dolphin's track becomes clearer over the coming days, with forecasters cautioning that day 5 to 7 position estimates for any typhoon routinely shift by hundreds of kilometers, meaning the storm's ultimate path toward Okinawa, northern Taiwan, or even a recurve toward the Korean peninsula remains genuinely unresolved as of this video. Meteorologists tracking the 2026 season's broader Category 5 pace will continue watching whether additional storms reach that threshold before the season's typical peak months conclude, a pace that, if it continues, could put 2026 within reach of surpassing 1997's nearly 3-decade-old global record. Final thought: a storm capable of generating 13-meter waves and winds strong enough to be classified alongside history's most extreme. Tropical cyclones, forming in a part of the Pacific rarely associated with storms this powerful, is a genuinely significant meteorological event on its own. That it's the 5th such storm this year, arriving ahead of the pace of the current all-time global record, adds a layer of significance that goes beyond any single forecast track or landfall. Dolphin is, in a very real sense, a physical signature of the Super El Niño currently reshaping ocean temperatures and storm behavior across multiple basins simultaneously. The same broad climate pattern, quietly influencing storms as different as this typhoon barreling toward East Asia and the unusually weak, wind shear-limited tropical storm that lingered along the U.S. Gulf Coast just weeks earlier. Whether Dolphin ultimately makes landfall as a weakened but still dangerous system, or recurves out to open water entirely, the record it's already set stands on its own, a reminder of just how extreme this particular hurricane season has already become, with months of peak activity still ahead. We will keep tracking this story and every other major seismic, volcanic, and extreme weather event happening around the world right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the update on Dolphin's final track. And leave that comment below. Have you ever experienced a typhoon or hurricane at its peak strength? Tell me where you were. 5,000 likes on this video. Let's go. See you in the next one.